And we get started. And just before I pop up the slide deck, or sort of as I'm doing it, I want to welcome everybody. I want to thank you all for being here today. And we look forward to I hope a really good webinar. And I want to start, I suppose, primarily by welcoming PJ. And PJ is, I'm Pádraig Berry. As for those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of TTI Success Insights here in Ireland. And our speaker today is PJ Timmins, and he's going to talk from the TAB, the Alternative Board. He's the CEO of TAB here in Ireland, and he's going to talk about the timeless principles of exceptional business. And I have to say, quite honestly, I know PJ, actually, I don't know how long I know you, PJ, but I know you a fair number of years. And I'm always interested to hear what you'd say, and I'm particularly interested to hear what you say today. For those of you who don't know PJ, he was the CEO of Cleary's, a company director. I don't know how many companies, but I know you're in software, property, retailing, healthcare, music, and the not-for-profits, if I've got it all covered there, PJ. You were the president of the Dublin Chamber, and you were chair of Drink Aware, a really interesting program. Founding director of Dublin City Bid Company and Retail Ireland. You're involved in GS1 Ireland. You're chairman of HR Duo, You Bloom, O'Leary's Opticians, and you're an angel investor. You're a chartered accountant. You hold a diploma from Smurfit in corporate governance, and of course you're certified in all our tools, DISC, driving force, EQ, axiology, and you're a tried coach. So now you're a really, really interesting guy who's done a lot of interesting things. And most interesting though, you brought in, I think it was 2013 or thereabouts, you brought TAB to Ireland. And TAB helps people build their businesses. It's sort of what you do. So you are really, not only do you build business yourself, but you now help other people build businesses. So what I'm saying to everybody is we sort of have a master, a real master here with us today. And I think what you're going to share is going to be really interesting. Now, today's talk is about timeless principles and of exceptional business. And I think most of you will be aware of most of the principles that PJ will actually talk about. At some stage, it'll have crossed your mind, or they will have crossed your mind. The question, of course, is, do you actually use them? Do you actually practice them? And I've always held the view that the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, applies to business success. There's about 20% of the things that if you do them consistently and repetitively, you'll have an 80% chance of being successful. And this is really what PJ is going to talk about, a selection of these 20% that really give you the best shot at being successful. So I think he's going to talk about you as a leader, your culture, your one thing, your USP, your brand, what your customers think, working below your pay grade, and I think a whole plethora of other bits and pieces. So buckle up, guys. Here we go. And I'm going to hand over to you, PJ. I'm going to say thank you for being here, but I think you want to talk about thank you in the red rose a little bit differently.
Thank you, Pádraig, for that very kind and generous introduction. In fact, I would say probably I'm a student rather than a master, because I think I learn a little bit every day. And the more I know I don't know. But thank you. The principles I'd like to talk about are the principles that came about in a book written by the TAB masters around the world and people who'd been in TAB for a long time. And the concept was, well, what led to enduring business success? So I'm going to talk about stories around three aspects of business. One is what's going on outside your business and your relationship with the outside world. The other is what's going on in your business, which is the people, the culture, things like that. And then a little bit about what's going on inside your own head as a business owner. So the first story I'd like to talk about is, does anybody here know what a palmetto bug is? Well, a palmetto bug comes from Florida, and it's the dirtiest, biggest cockroach you've ever seen in your life. And often you'll have an infestation. So anyway, this lady finds a place is infested with palmetto bugs. So she goes to the local Google, rings up the local exterminator who comes in. Doesn't know who she's used before, but she just gets one out of the book. And then when she leaves the house, as you must do. And when she comes back into the house, she sees a little note on her desk and wrapped in red rose within the note. And it said, "Dear householder, we are so sorry that you had to use this on this occasion. And we've exterminated all of your palmetto bugs. But should they come back, please give us a call, and we give a 90-day guarantee to make sure that there's no palmetto bugs will come back into your home. We really wish you to have a lovely day." And it was signed off by the individual who came to remove the bugs. Now, the next door neighbor had the same issue, and they were chatting about it afterwards. And the lady with the red rose said, "Who did you use?" "I can't remember." He said, "Oh, wait till I tell you my story and about my red rose." So what is the red rose? If you think about extermination, is about as little, it's undifferentiated. People are just ringing up the yellow pages or whatever, looking up the Google for it. But it means you can find a red rose and a point of differentiation for every business. And what differentiates your business helps people to remember you, and that's the way they will spread the word. So how do you find a red rose? Well, the first thing is to get to know your competitors, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what's their Achilles heel, the what, the how, the why. Now you can call them. You can look for people who are their customers. What kind of referrals do they get? You can mystery shop them. And you can talk to their suppliers and find out about what is it that makes them great or different. The second point then is to identify your signature element that makes you stand out and be memorable. And you can do that with your team. You can brainstorm it. You can brainstorm with your friends, with great customers even. Now, the key with the signature element is it must separate you from other providers, and your customers must find it valuable. I know when we meet loads of members in the beginning that they say, "What differentiates you?" And they say, "Oh, we give great service." The question is, who will go to somebody who doesn't give great service? Would you ever go to a company that gives bad service? So your service quality is just not good enough. It's got to have that signature element to it. So one of our members, we have an example there. Our one is Orca Financial. And John Malloy of Orca Financial has a red rose. His specialism is dealing with business owners for their pensions. They charge less, but other people might charge, less as well. But he's found the best way to understand the client's goal is to actually and find what's the good match for them, is to sit at the kitchen table with them, get to know the family. Another tab member, Camille Thai, for example, when they getting their delivery done of your Thai food, it's not just done by anybody, because this is the touch point. It's done by a delivery guy who's in a tuxedo. So these are all points of your finding your points of differentiation. There's a little video up there, Pádraig, if you could just have it click through and hopefully people can hear it.
None of you get it. Do you know what the secret of life is?
No, what?
This.
Your finger?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean.
It's great, but what's the one thing?
That's what you gotta figure out.
So you've got to figure one thing that really separates you. The next thing is about discovering your why. And people buy from people and brands they know, like, and trust. And that's if they get your why. If I get your why, I trust you. And our brains are actually wired in a way with our mirror neurons that says we get each other. So let's see a story of somebody who made a critical mistake and broke that trust, that why, and it cost them very dearly. Some of you may remember Gerald Ratner. Gerald learned in the marketplaces in Petticoat Lane. It wasn't the cheapest or the best quality, but the loudest, most garish displayed products. People loved it.
Yeah.
And he went from, when he inherited, I think, 150 stores, he went over 20,000 stores in 6 years in the UK, 50% of the UK jewelry market. And he blew it in less than 30 seconds. At an Institute of Directors lunch, he said, we also do this nice sherry decanter. It's cut glass. It comes with 6 glasses on a silver plate that butler could bring you in and serve your drinks on. And it really only costs £4.95. People say to me, how do you sell this for such a low price? I say, because it's total crap. We even sell a pair of earrings for under £1. Gold earrings as well. Some people say it's cheaper than a prawn sandwich from Marks and Spencer. But I have to say the sandwich would probably last longer than the earrings. Now, the Sun had called it Crackners. They called him a 22-carat mug. And in 6 weeks, he created a one-man recession. Why? Because a product, he had the same product, the same price, the same distribution, the same advertising. But a gift is an emotional transaction. You never actually use the product yourself. And Gerald's why was disconnected to the customer's why. Gerald's why became, I want to sell large volumes of crap. And that company went bust within months.
That's actually, I never heard that until you shared this with me. That's actually an amazing story. Is that actually true?
It is true. You can look it up. That's Gerald himself.
I can vouch for that, PJ. I remember that actually. I remember it.
Incredible.
Incredible. So, leading guru Simon Sinek, start with a company's why they do what they do, not what they do. So great companies create an emotional connection with the prospect. Descartes, philosopher, said, I think, therefore I am. But the neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, found that we're not thinking machines that feel, but feeling machines that think.
Yeah.
Now, customers are always making buying decisions most emotionally and justifying them logically. Sinek uses the Apple concept, which is everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. And the way we change the status quo is making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make computers. Want to buy one? So the reversal is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
I always remember, PJ, watching Simon Sinek when he first made that clip on it, that presentation on the TED Talk, whatever it was, and thinking that was incredible. And it really sort of blew my mind away, because I asked myself, because I'm a Mac man, so I'm surrounded here by Mac technology. And I asked myself at the time, why do I buy Mac? Well, I buy them because I also wear cowboy boots and ride a motorbike, and because it's sort of related to me. And I said, this is the kind of company that I want to do business with. And if you ask the question, and I remember afterwards, Simon Sinek, another thing, asking the question, if you heard that Apple were bringing out the iCar next week, what would you think? If you heard that Dell were bringing out the Dell car, what would you think? Well, you say the iCar, say, yeah, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be awesome. If you heard about the Dell car, you say, what are they doing? They make computers. It's a really, really interesting concept when you think it through, isn't it?
And there's a lot of neuroscience marketing on this, and particularly there's a book that looks at the way our amygdala makes these emotional decisions, but the way they can ultimately, it's now the connection once you've gone through that first hurdle to get to the logical part of the brain, which actually is looking at how the decisions are made. So there's some very strong books on the people who did the original research on that. But anyway, back to what if you could find customers who are different, indifferent to cost, quality, or convenience. If you could find those, who would repeatedly buy your product, who rave to their friends about you. So these customers, really, if you have them, they're your raving fans or your promoters. But we can now measure them, and we get a lot of our tab members to do it. In fact, we have an optical business as well. And every transaction that's over 50 euros, we do what we call a net promoter score on it. So when you differentiate about how you deliver service, the next let's discuss what and why you do what you do. I think I did it right. Okay. Trust and loyalty really are emotional things. And when you ask people about it, they don't actually know how to respond to it. So transferring that trust and loyalty through voluntary promotion is the magic, we all want for our businesses. Now, Fred Reichfield of Bain & Company determined that an answer to one simple question that measures that, it measures the loyalty your customers have, and he called it Net Promoter Score, or NPS. Many of you are familiar with this. It's very simply, on a simple question, on a scale of 0 to 10, what is the likelihood you would recommend our product service to a good friend or colleague? I'm sure you've been asked that lots of time. There is a second question to it also, which is, why did you give it that score? So initially, you're just getting this measure because people don't know what to articulate, but you get your qualitative research from the answer you actually get in the second part.
And PJ, how do you do that in the optical business? How do you actually do you ask them in the store?
No, it's done afterwards, and we outsource it to Big Picture Marketing, who gives us the reports, and it's on the staff notice boards, and it is the single KPI. We'll talk about them later, which everybody is totally conscious of. So in other words, our business is not run by management, it's run by the customers, because every piece of customer feedback is looked at and analyzed.
Okay.
Yeah, and PJ, just a comment from myself there. You need to do this a lot more than once. You need to be doing this on a regular basis, I think, not just
every single transaction.
Yeah.
Every single transaction. So moving on from that, yes, this is the score where NPS is calculated by dividing the percentage of customers who rate you 9 to 10. These are your promoters. We like to say the people who scores you 7 and 8, it's a bit like Switzerland not doing anything for you. And 6s and below are a brand detractor 100% of the time. So in our system, for example, any score of 6 or less immediately goes to Mairead, who actually follows up personally. And we know that we can turn 90% of detractors into promoters. The things we've learned out have been extraordinary. We used to sell high index progressive lenses that were thinner and lighter. Today, the first question is, would you like a pair of all distance lenses? Because our NPS was telling us that people weren't understanding what we were saying, even though these are standard industry terms. Too many people are getting confused. The other thing, it enables you to understand who your actual clients are. So the people generally who, let's say the 10% that we don't turn into promoters, we take them off the list. They never should be our customers in the first place. In other words, it enables you to focus laser on who should be your customers and who shouldn't. And the more you do it, it ups the game for everybody internally, and particularly because you can drill down to Net Promoter Score per optician even.
Can I take you back for a moment, PJ? Just ask you a question. So you were saying you eliminate people from your database.
They will not get patient reminders because so not every customer is the customer for you. They happen to come to you from time to time.
That's it. Okay, that's interesting. I never thought of that. You're actually saying this is not a potential customer for us. We're wasting their time.
This is not a good customer. This is a customer that's going to burn energy from everybody. It's not going to be a profitable customer.
Yeah, okay, good one. Okay, thank you.
So now not everybody has this worldwide altruistic why, put every computer in everybody's desk. But most people who have businesses, they didn't like their boss and they had a great idea. But what we do know about business owners invariably is they do love their idea and their customers and maybe their staff. And there is a reason why you jump out of bed every morning. And this is perhaps the why you need to maybe share with your marketplace and who you're actually dealing with. So how do you tell that story? Well, once you've established your why, the best way maybe to tell the story is through, and bringing a why to life is through stories. And these stories create an emotional connection between your customers and your why. And these customers will be your promoters, particularly the 9s and 10s. And we'd probably argue that the biggest storyteller, today is probably Pixar. Not only have they created so many great hits, it's not just because of technology, but it's because of the stories they tell. And Emma Coates, the former story artist from Pixar, identified that every Pixar story follows this template. Once upon a time, a position, every day, that's what they did, one day, and because of that, until finally. So it is this story that you can actually tell, and you can tell your story in exactly that same fashion. The next thing we discovered by talking to all the people who had been in business for many, many years was that we did some research with them, and the discovery actually surprised all of us. But the question was, what would they have done differently if they were launching their business, if they knew everything, at the end of their careers? And the number one answer actually was they would spend more time focusing on brand building. That is the result of that survey. Not better advertising campaigns, not any of these others. So your brand, people mix it up with logos and things like that. But I think the Jeff Bezos, Amazon CEO, best described it as what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Another way I like to put it is the totality of emotions that your stakeholders have about you.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, a brand is formed primarily not by what you say about your company, but by what other people say about you. Now, a strong brand sells more products or services. People will pay more for it. Customers will purchase more frequently from it. And we talked about Apple earlier. I've been following the Apple story for a number of years. And last year, Apple still only had 14% of unit sales, but yet it earned 75% of profits of the whole industry.
Wow. Well, I can actually vouch as the truth of that, because I know that my laptop costs about 3 times what the equivalent Windows-based one would cost. Yeah.
Samsung, 23% of turnover, 17% of profits. Now, if you work out, there's very little profit going for the remainder.
Yeah.
And Apple really hold all of the profitability of it. So that's the importance of strong brand. So your strong value of your business is a strong brand. And it's not about what you do, but again, it's the value that the customer perceives from the product or service.
Yeah.
Often with members, I ask them, what do you sell? Then I ask, what emotion do you sell to? And they struggle with that a lot more.
Yeah.
So we all know the one thing.
It's a big question, isn't it, PJ? I mean, I'm even thinking about my own business in TTI or your business. What are we actually selling? I mean, what is the emotion we're addressing? It's not obvious at all, actually. I know in a coaching client, but I know in a coaching client or one of your tab members, they want to be in an environment where they can share stories, where they can get feedback, where they can be with peers who have the same struggles they were. So there's sort of a support mechanism there. And then there's other expertise you're bringing in around it. But I mean, not sure in the case of somebody using our psychometrics, for example, a coach or a trainer or a recruiter, what's the emotional attachment there? So these things aren't obvious at all.
A lot of it is that I don't want to screw up.
Yeah.
I screwed up before. I don't want to look bad, or I want to find a reason to justify what I feel emotionally.
Yeah.
And this is the crutch that enables them to do that.
Yeah, good one.
So we're all familiar with Theodore Levitt's, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want to buy the hole it creates, and that, or it can be something that sticks my picture to the wall, whatever it is. So if a brand is a promise, is what it's going to do, well, then a great brand is a promise kept.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have no midsize available at the moment.
I don't understand. I made a reservation. Do you have my reservation?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we ran out of cars.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservation.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do. If you did, I'd have a car. So you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold the reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation, the holding. Anybody can just take them.
I'm sorry, we have.
That didn't come across quite as clear, but we're a lot of are experiencing that at the moment, that Ryanair's brand is going up and up, and Aer Lingus brand is in trouble. Because Ryanair are flying, they're not cancelling their flights like Aer Lingus. So if you think about the amount of damage that can be done in a situation like that, that was a little clip from Seinfeld that goes back many years ago, but it looks at a broken promise. And the Ryanair, they're not quite landing on time. I was out in Amsterdam last Friday, 2 weeks on a day trip. So started off at 2 a.m. from Dublin and queues at Dublin. And I got in at 9:30 and I only had a 45 minutes interview with an owner of a boat that I was looking to buy south of Rotterdam. But the queues and everything were just incredible. But Ryanair, at least when I arrived at the Ryanair stand in Schiphol, I arrived half an hour later than my gate close date and 5 minutes before my departure time. And I came to the area and I found it was totally empty except for the ladies and gentlemen on reception. And I said, oh my God, sorry, the plane has left. And they said, no, you're first to arrive. So that's how bad things just are at the moment if you're traveling.
Wow.
So if a brand is a promise, will a great promise kept? Let's have a look at that. We're not going to be able to cover the whole lot of making great brands here. But one of our members who has created a really strong brand, the leading brand in Ireland is Camille Thai. And they focus very much on brand. And yes, they get a lot more for their product, but they've got an emotional connection with their customer. So some tips about creating a strong brand. In Tab, for example, ours is about a safe place. It's a place where people can figure out how they go forward in the future, but also what's their personal vision. So the first thing is to start with the value of the product or service, identify your differentiator. What would you want to be known for? And then make a brand promise and communicate it through stories. But you've got to keep that promise and exceed the customer's expectations. So it really stands at that point of differentiation. Now maybe looking a bit more within the company a little bit more, looking at the culture inside the business. Now the truth is that every single one of our businesses, you can smell the culture of it. Even you can nearly do it the way people hold their webinars, whatever, people are working in the virtual world. But every business has a defined culture and you get it really quick. It's the way we do things around here. It's what does it take to get on around here. And Alan Fishman, the founder of the Alternative Board, said culture is the invisible force that propels your business forward or not. It's the roof that protects you when the storm comes in or not. So you can have a good culture or a bad culture. One thing we've learned over the years is that a company's culture in the smaller businesses is largely defined by the behavior and the style of the owner. So your employees look to you, how they should behave, how they should try to do things. And the question is, does your culture happen by accident or by design? And what if your culture is not what you want it to be? And I've certainly seen strong cultures. I remember when I worked in McInerney Properties that a lady came into the organization. They hadn't done the checks, but her dad was a union leader, whereas McInerney's was Rome wasn't built in a week, but then McInerney's didn't build it. It was always on to the next project, and there was no room for any sort of procedural sort of thing. So if your culture is not what you want it to be, how do you create that culture that you desire in the business. And you can move on. A little story from Gandhi. Gandhi used to meet, Gandhi would be a personal kind of hero of mine going back many years. I was lucky enough to take an elective in college, which included Indian history. And one of the stories about Gandhi was this: he used to meet the public. He was known as Bapu, their kind of leader. And there was a big queue, and this lady joined the queue with her son. And she said to Gandhi, Gandhi, will you tell my son to stop eating sugar? We want him to grow up and be healthy. And Gandhi thought about it for a few moments, and he said, Madam, will you please come back in 2 weeks' time? So she was a little bit perplexed, but she said, thank you, Babu, and away she went. She made the long journey again in 2 weeks' time and rejoined the queue and eventually got to Gandhi. And she said, Bapu, will you please tell my son to stop eating sugar? We want him to grow up and be strong and healthy. Gandhi looked at the son and he said, my son, you should really listen to your mother. You should really give up sugar. You want to grow up to be wise, healthy, live long life and be strong. And the mother was ecstatic. It was wonderful that, Gandhi had told her son to do this. And she was just about to turn away. And she said, Bapu, I was here 2 weeks ago. Why couldn't you tell him then? And Bapu, Gandhi said, but 2 weeks ago, I too was eating sugar. The point is here, you have to walk the talk. So really, by starting to write down your values, and you got to live those values, because you can undermine them in a minute. One of our members has the values all the way up the stairs in lettering. Another has them behind the desk, so when everybody comes in, they've got the whole list of values in front of them all the time. And in Tab, you might see a picture behind me, just over there. It actually says caliber. We say we're people of caliber who deal with people of caliber. And caliber stands for a community that's willing to give and receive and to help each other. A, for accountability and not blaming others, but looking to ourselves and being accountable. L, for lifelong learning. And because we need to be ahead of the game in order to help our members. I, for innovation. That was probably the hardest one, because most of the people coming into Tab probably in their 50s. So there's a little bit of old dogs learning new tricks from time to time. And that was a big challenge. B, for the belief that we're changing the lives of millions of people, because we're changing leaders and developing leaders. E, for excellence in everything we do. And and respect for all of our members, our tools, and our community. So we can actually all just say, just from that one word, what are the principal things? What are the caliber things? We have caliber meetings. We recognize caliber activities, which all are in alignment with that. And the word caliber is very much embedded in the whole kind of Tab process. So one thing is when you're working with business leaders, there's two things they can't delegate. And one is the strategic direction of the business. And the other is responsibility for that culture.
Absolutely.
So the chief CCO is the chief cultural officer. And that can be a way of rethinking what is the real role of the CEO? Because the CEO becomes a jack of all trades, master of none, often. And that is the key. I gotta move on here.
Well, it segues nicely into this, doesn't it? Because if that's what the CEO is supposed to be doing, the question is, what should the CEO not be doing?
And of course, what they certainly should be doing is not working below their pay grade. And if you look at these money, people, time, but it can't control people. You know what people are like. Money comes in, goes out, markets change, recessions happen, all of that. So the only one you do have any control over is the relationship you have with time and the effectiveness. It passes by steadily, but you do have control of how you spend it and where you spend it. So how much would you say your value is? We ask people, what is their value? We find that invariably people, and you may find it yourselves, that you may be working below your pay grade. tasks that easily could be done by somebody for much less. And even when I started off this business back almost a decade ago, I was opening emails, organizing meetings, doing social media, all tasks way below the pay grade of the MD. So I had to practice what I preached, because it is so easy to get caught in the tyranny of the urgent versus the important. And then there's a bundle of reasons we can't delegate. So
absolutely. It's interesting, PJ, I recall once showing up for a meeting with a client, and he left me sitting for half an hour. He was a half an hour late, and I was sitting down in the lobby, and eventually he came down and said, oh, I'm really sorry. And I said, that's no problem. He's an important client. That's no problem. I said, out of curiosity, what were you doing? He said, I was doing the invoicing. And this is significant. Look, I said, what do you mean you were doing the invoicing? He said, yeah. He said, I'm the one who really understands all the customers, and I really have to do the invoicing. And I said, how long do you spend doing the invoicing? Oh, he said, maybe an hour or two a week. I said, an hour. I said, that's a day a month. And he said, yeah, I said, if I give you a day a month to go out and sell, for example, 1 day a month to go out, how many meetings do you have? Maybe 3 or 4 meetings. I said, if you do that every month for a year, you'd have 48 meetings. Do you think would that have an impact on your business? So that was the last time he did the invoicing. So I know exactly what you're talking about there, PJ.
I know we just had somebody recently in one of our groups, and I just see Peter on the call here, but I think the answer was something like a 60% return. They got 60% time saving by working on this particular process.
Yeah.
So the things that bring, greatest value invariably are, establishing the strategic plan, establishing culture, building strategic partnerships, speaking with your customers. We just had it at a board meeting yesterday for a CEO who had managed to delegate and now was what was his new job description and new role. So build a list of your platinum activities, and your platinum activities are those activities that bring greatest value to the business. Step 2 is create a to-don't list. So if you take one thing out of this presentation is when you get back to the office, or you close down the screenshot, pull out a sheet and put to-don't on it. Keep it in your top drawer or on your screensaver or whatever it is, and just start to capture what they are. Don't try and fix it, because the reason people always say, like Porrick just said, nobody else knows, and therefore the circle continues. So you actually have this issue of you have to park it separately and just catch it. And it's only when you've done all of that you can talk to your coach, or you can look at it strategically and look at, how do I find other people to offload it? We said you've got to automate, delegate, or eliminate.
Yeah.
And then you've got to design your prime time. That is the time. Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Your prime time should be the time that you don't be taking it to emails, take calls and all of that. You commit to working on the platinum activities during your prime time. That is the strategy. We know if you want to get away from the urgent, the tyranny of the urgent, strategy is never urgent, but it is very important. And you have to diarize it and put it into it. And if you can't get it, get a coach.
Yeah, it's interesting, PJ, on that. And I've often said to clients over the years that we talk about this thing of you have to swallow your frog. But it's a similar concept, isn't it? You identify the things that actually matter. You chunk out the time to do them, and you do them first.
So the next thing is we all want to run our business from the boat or abroad or someplace like that. And that's where you've got to think about running your business by the KPIs. So, a GPS is your real-time dashboard of where you're going to or your destination. It's giving your petrol consumption, everything. I tell one little story. We used to own sunglasses in the Blanchardstown Centre. It was part of the optical business. And the critical success factor was could people sell sunglasses to the Sunglass Hut formula? And it worked. But how do you measure it? Because if you think about it, Sunglass Hut particularly operates in airports. It's got graveyard shifts, many part-timers, and you can have sales takers or sales makers. So sales takers really had no hope. And what was the KPI? The KPI was the percentage of care kits sold. So if you follow the process, you identify the needs of the patient or the customer. You would then start to demonstrate, well, here's what I'm recommending. You would take off the spectacles and you take out a care kit and you give a little squirt and you'd show, making sure that the little screwdriver to make sure that the screws were in tightly, and then a little polish up to make sure it's shining. So the merchandise is always shining for a start. And then you delicately put it on somebody's face, very intimate moment. But when it came to closing the sale, there was the thing about, would you like 1 or 2 care kits? Now, if you got less than 30% for 2 years in a row, you lost your job. It was simple as that. Such was that if you were a sales taker, you were trying to shove the care kit sale at the end of, no, I'm grand. In other words, you weren't abiding by the process. So that's an example of a KPI that was making sure you had the right people on the bus selling and following the process, because they were always working on their own. They had no managers looking at them or anything like that. We can all have bad KPIs, and I've used bad KPIs myself. So when you're looking at a sales funnel, if you don't know the numbers, you can't change the results. You need to know the numbers at each of these steps. If you don't know the numbers, you can't even coach your people through the failures and where they're failing in the steps. And we know that the role of the sales manager or the business owner, if they're running a sales team, it's 40% coaching. But you can't coach if you don't know the numbers. Simple as that. So there's a lot of potential KPIs, and KPIs is we do full sessions on KPIs, but some tips would be maybe start with about 5. See, can you get the data? Make sure it's accurate. Produce them monthly. Share the results widely. I think I talked about earlier about the net performance score. I remember going into one of the branches and said, oh, you did a great month last month. Score of 85 in your NPS. And the retort back was, well, the previous month we had 90. So in other words, completely aware of what the KPI was. So think about the behavior you're trying to change. And one story against myself would be, I once measured arrest rates in the retail store, the wrong one of the security department. And the stop loss got worse and worse. I changed the KPI to measuring the number of stops as recorded by the guy working the cameras in the camera center. And we were doing 800 stops. We had everybody in alignment and the stop loss went down and down. Yeah. Arrests were encouraging them to let baddies into the store and arrest them, creating conflict in the store, all sorts of bad things. So be really careful about what KPI you're actually using. The last principle just would be about exiting on your own terms. In terms, everybody will exit their business, and it'll be a transaction of some sort, or a liquidation, or you go out in a box, die in the saddle. But it's much better if people plan an exit on their own terms. And what does that mean? Well, as the baby boomers now, including myself, in the 60s, born in the 60s and of 60s, there's really not enough buyers out there. People don't want to take on debt. That was a big lesson from the last recession, where people got into negative equity for a long time. The markets are much less sophisticated in that the banks are not advancing money the way they used to. And people are getting less. And this phenomenon started in the States very much, 10 years ago, we would have seen. The millennial Gen X, they don't want a debt, and they don't want what created that crash before. And we know that the earnings are, 3.6 but it very much depends on, is the business dependent on you or not? So things you maybe need to consider. Again, it's one of those important issues rather than an urgent issue. And people often don't exit because they don't plan it well enough to exit on their own terms. It seems like a hassle, but that's why we say to people, join boards. We create boards that are purely people focusing on exit. And the first thing we identify is that the businesses are dependent on them. There's no separating me from my business. Yeah. And you'll hear that regularly. with people. So Bo Burlington, who said finishing big, he identified the elements of a good exit. Owners feel that they've been fairly treated during the exit process, fairly compensated, and they're at peace with their former employees. And they've discovered a new sense of purpose outside their business. We know that, you know, when people, the first year is the holiday year. And then you ask somebody who's retired to do something, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I don't know what I was doing beforehand. How did I manage it all? And the reality is we are creatures that need habit in our lives. And the question is, what are the habits we put in afterwards? Up to 80% of business owners that exit are unhappy after 18 months after their exit, because some of those aspects that Bo Burlington mentioned there of a good exit hasn't happened. I think maybe if you can bring it forward. So build a business that can be sold to whom and when you want to sell. That's the first thing. And that means you need constant profitability, going in the right direction, not dependent on you. Give yourself time to prepare. It's years, not months. Get advice from other business owners. And be sure to figure out what comes next. In other words, don't be exiting your business because you don't like certain things. It's about because you want to do certain things, because that's one of the keys to happiness within that. Look, in this book, there are many other principles, you know, getting the right people on the bus, running the business like a franchise, achieving a balance to your life between work and outside, and many, many more. Other principles, you know, if you're in the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And that's probably where our members find that they do get and receive this monthly input from other owners who know what it's like to run a business. And it's pretty much priceless. And I think, so maybe just to conclude really there, it is one of the principles again, if you want to go fast, okay, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. If anybody wants a copy of the book, just drop a line to Julie Barra at the Alternative Board and we'll post it out to you. So we've got a few minutes for Q&A, Corey.
Yeah, that was actually, I'm just going to flick back. I really like that quote. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's one we want to to start sharing with my clients. Really good. Yeah. Thanks, PJ. That was actually a wonderful, webinar and fascinating stuff and stuff close to my heart as well. I have to say, quite honestly, and being a bit of an entrepreneur like yourself as well. It was really, really interesting. So anybody have any questions you'd like to ask PJ? Now is the time. You can pop them in the chat if you want, or you can just turn on your mic and your camera and ask the question. It's really up to. I have a couple I want to ask anyway, PJ, but let's see if we get any more first. Peter, you've turned on your camera there. Do you have a question you want to ask us? Good to see you, Peter.
Oh, hi. How are you? No, I just suddenly realized my camera had gone off, so I just turned it back on. It's been acting up the last couple of days, so.
You're working, Peter, you're working with Tab, aren't you? You're doing some work with them now.
I am. I'm doing some facilitation with Tab, and we have another business, myself and PJ together, so.
Very good.
So I've been through a lot of this before, so it would look odd if I asked a question, I think.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. So the question I've been wanting to ask you, PJ, since you said you do this webinar. When you look at something like a Tab board, I understand the principle of a Tab board. You're bringing people into an environment that is safe, where they can share, where they can get feedback from peers, a comfortable, safe space, as you say, to discuss issues that they perhaps can't discuss with their colleagues at work, like their team or whatever. And also to learn and grow and to see things differently, put structure and order of what they're doing. But what about people who leave Tab, people who come and people who leave? Do you do any research on people who actually don't stay there, don't stay on the Tab board, who actually drop out, and why that might be?
Yes, there's, we always look at that. And the really interesting one was the first losses that we had, that we analyzed them. And it was myself and Brian were in the beginning, this is going back some years. And we discovered that for people who understand the high green or the high S, the people who like stable environments, that character, we were, both of us, we were of a different profile. Our profiles were much more red, yellow. We were anxious to get on with things. We were pushing. They didn't like to be pushed.
Yeah.
And we were too ambitious for them. We were ambitious
Yeah.
for their businesses. And we learned out of that we've got to recognize the progress they're making, help them make, because when they make decisions, they don't want to revisit it. They want to think it through very carefully. But when things are done, they're really done, and they don't come back to them.
Yeah.
Whereas the high reds, it's all next, and it didn't work, I'll try this, and I'll try that, and I'll try the next. So that was the first losses. So we had to really learn our disc a lot more to understand what those kind of customers. The second kind of customer we'd lose them reasonably quickly, and that's the one who can't afford to be upfront. So I remember a gentleman who was, let's say, driving a very posh car and owed the revenue a fortune.
Yeah.
That sort of character, they can't open up they need to be open. As I said, it's about a community it's about giving and receiving. So people get out of it what they put into it.
Yeah.
And we were on a call yesterday where this gentleman had retired from his tab board and his business after 28 years. That's how long he'd been a tab member.
Yeah, this was my second question that I was going to ask you was, if those are the people even, I understand the thing of being too ambitious for your clients, by the way, that really resonates with me. Taking them somewhere that they really don't want to go, or trying to take them there too quickly. But the ones who stay the course, can you tell me something about the profile of those people? Like, what are the characteristics of those people?
There's first of all, every disc profile under the sun, and we actually like to make sure that we have some kind of gender balance, and that we've got different disc profiles on a group, because each one has their own strengths, and they all understand that this is the time that they spend to work strategically on their business. So in other words, something comes up in the month, I can deal with that then.
Now,
So
let me interrupt you and ask you a question there, because it's interesting. And the reason I asked you this question, because I had a client once who used to drive up to Dublin from Kerry for a meeting with me. And he'd drive up 4 hours up from Killarney. We'd have the meeting, and a 2-hour meeting, and they drive 4 hours back. And I remember one day, I just couldn't take this anymore. One day he was coming, I said, "This is wrong." I said, I'm wasting, because I'm high resourceful. I said, "I'm wasting your time. Like 4 hours up, 4 hours back for 2 hours. I mean, this is insane. I have to meet you halfway or something." He said, no. He said, "This is my day off to think." And he said, "It's the only day a month. I'm commissioned this. I've paid the money up front to you, Pádraig." He said, "I'm committed to showing up. I have 4 hours of drive. I reflect on everything that's happened over the last month. I have my 2 hours with you. I discuss all these issues honestly and openly. And then I have 4 hours going back down, decide what I'm going to do next." So is that important, this idea of chunking the time out? There's a time or space where they chunk out, where they're free actually to think non-operationally, to think strategically, to think about themselves and their own roles and so on.
It is an important aspect of it. There's also the fact that this is the group of professional friends that they depend on, that they can ring up at any time. It's not just their facilitator, it's their other board members. So they don't really have any other world where you can have 6 or 7 really trusted people that know your business. They know you because we all share, everybody's disc profiles and everything is shared. And they get to know and deepen the relationship with each other over the years.
And of course, they've no agenda.
But what we would see also is that let's say the members who make most progress, they're very utilitarian about how they actually use their membership. And I will see within 2 minutes, we do a little bit of chit chat, see how they're scoring on personal and business. Then they'll say, "Here's what I want from the board, and here's what I want from you." Literally, they're that direct, and they will do it. They're the ones who actually make most progress because they're thinking about it. They know how they're going to get the help, and they're very, rather than, you do have members where we have to say, "Oh, everything's going great, everything's going." So in other words, the scale of ambition is what means the ones who actually last longest, that they want to make change. It's not that they want to conquer the world, but they want to change things within themselves, or they want to change things with their business or their relationship or whatever it is. And even the brightest and the best have weak points. We all have. And the people who are most aware of them are the people who will depend on the board to give them the sense check on that. If I'm a bit mad, well, my board will calm me down. If I'm just not ambitious enough or not adventurous enough, the board are going to help me find a risk way of going forward that enables me to make progress.
And you know, PJ, isn't it? We say that feedback is a breakfast of champions. We all know the cliche. But the truth of the matter is feedback from objective people with no agenda, peers who understand you, is critical.
Hugely important.
Yes.
We're social animals.
Yeah.
And this is what enables us to, they know that it's that I must fess up the commitment I made last month, I got to fess up that I've actually done it.
Yeah.
And that is a very powerful thing because nobody wants to turn up at school and get bad marks.
Well, listen, thank you very much, Fiji. That was excellent. That was a wonderful webinar. Really, really appreciate the talk. And I'd like to thank everybody who showed up. And I wish you all a happy end of July. I hope you're avoiding COVID. It's running rampant at the moment, so be careful out there. And we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks very much, PJ. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Warwick. Thank you all.
Thanks, Warwick. Thanks, PJ.